today we are going to learn how to implement multiple themes feature in our React project using the useReducer hook. So in this project, you get to learn about how to use the useReducer hook, and then I'm going to chip in context API tool somewhere in the middle. Alright, so before I proceed, I want you to explore my project and see how it works, okay? Alright, so you see that on click of this change color button over here, a modal appears, and then it gives me the option to select a color. On selection of yellow, you realize that my theme of my web page changes to yellow. On selection of purple, it changes to purple. On selection of brown, it changes to brown. Another key feature I added to this is local storage. So upon refresh of the page, you realize that the theme that has been selected remains. Okay, so now you're going to learn how to implement this. So let's get straight forward to our Visual Studio Code to learn how to do this. Alright, so inside my Visual Studio Code, I've opened up my project. You can clone my project, okay? You can clone it. The link is in the video description, okay? So this is the setup file you're going to work on now to get on the finalized project. Okay. So you see over here that the feature hasn't been implemented yet. So you're going to try to implement this feature. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a modal, okay? Okay, so to do that, I'm going to create a div over here with a class of modal. Okay, don't worry, I've written all my CSS code already, so there's going to be less of CSS over here. So inside of this div, I'm going to create another div, which is the color BTS. Okay, so with color BTS, then inside of it, let me save this. So let's see what it does. So you see, I told you I've written the CSS code already, and then in my CSS, this is a fixed. Let's check that out in the CSS. This is a fixed div. A fixed div that is giving a height. Okay, so let's check that out. So you see it over here. Position is fixed. The background is white. The width is 60% of the page, and the height is 40% of the page left, and so on. So now let's make the buttons appear. Okay, remember we need the buttons. For the buttons that we need, you're going to get you're going to map some data. Okay, we are going to map this data from our data from data.jsx. Sorry. So in the data.jsx, you see over here there's an array of colors, a JSON of colors. Okay, so I'm going to import this into my card components. So colors from over here. Okay, so the colors is coming from over here. So over here I'm going to map these colors. Okay, so it's going to be colors. That's map colors.map, and then let's make things a bit easier. Okay, colors.map, and then inside of the map, I'm going to return buttons. Okay, so let me return some buttons, just a simple button for now, and then let me place a content inside it, or see item.color. Okay, so let's have a look at what appears. So without adding the additional styling, we see this on our page. So we see over here that everything is working perfectly. Now let's get into details. For my button, I'm going to add a class name of BTN. I've written the styles already, as I said. So when I add the class name of BTN, you see that our buttons are all looking a bit okay than before, but then I want to apply specific background to each of the buttons. Okay, so I'm going to fetch that data from my data.jsx. So my style, when you React, I have to bring two curly brackets, and then I want to change the background. Okay, so the background is going to be, I'm going to use a template string over here, and then I'm going to use JSX. So it's going to be item.color from my data. So meaning that the color of each of the buttons is going to be applied from my data. All right, so now for the item.name over here, I have to clear it out. I want to create a div over here. Okay, because the button should have two different items. It should have the name of the button and then the selected. You remember the selected. So I write my item.name. I'm going to implement the order feature later on. Okay, for now, you would expect to see an error in our console, because in React over here for our JSX, each item should have a key. Okay, so I'm going to use index for my key. So for the key, I'm going to make my key index to make things so simple and to avoid any kind of errors. So far, I think I'm done with my modal. It's looking great, except for some very few features I have to add to it. Okay, so now I want to store my value. I'm going to create a state to store the value of the initial color. Okay, so I'm going to create a use state, and then I'm going to see if the current color inside of the state. So the currently, let's say my state is blue, so because the current theme for the whole page is blue. So now I'm going to click the buttons to change the theme from blue to the specified color. Okay, all right, so for me to do that, I need to add a click feature to my button. So over here, on click, I'm going to create an arrow function. I'm going to create a function that help me to handle the theme toggle. So I'm going to create a handle theme toggle over here, and then I'm going to pass down a value into this function. So see the item.color. I'm going to pass down the color for me to be able to change the whole theme of my React app. So I'm going to create my function at the top over here. So handle theme toggle. This function is going to do everything. So handle theme toggle. I create a function over here, handle theme toggle, and then this function is going to update the current color. So I'm going to set current to the new and updated color that I want. So remember, I passed down a value, so I'm going to access that value over here, which is the item.color. So I'm going to set the current to the new color that has been selected by the user. Okay, over here I'm not seeing it working yet, but then as you go on, you see it work, meaning that the current color or my current theme is going to now be that of the item.color, which has been selected. Now let me come down here to edit this div. Okay, so remember that I told you that I'm going to add the class name of selected to it. Yes, I'm going to add that class name of selected to it. So I'm going to do that class name, so I'm going to add selected to it, class name, and then for my class name, I'm going to make it that if the current color or if the current theme is equal to the item.color, so if the user has selected that color, then we expect that the class name of selected is being applied to the button or to the name, to the div over here, or else the button is not selected. Okay, this is a React feature. So it seems like there's an error here. I have to check this out. There's something wrong with my CSS, but then basically for this code, it's trying to tell you that if the current theme is equal to that which is selected, then for our class name, selected has to be applied to the button. So for that class name of selected, remember that I've written my CSS code already, so you'd expect to see the class name of selected inside of my CSS. So let's check that out. So I go to my CSS, I scroll down to see my selected. Okay, So first of all, I want you to see some of the code I've written here for my color BTS, or that the code has been written already. Seems like my buttons were looking a bit weird. All right. So let me come back to my code over here to correct that issue. So for me to correct that issue, remember that we need a close button. Okay, so that modal we created, it has to contain the buttons and then the close icon. So I would have to create my close icon over here. Because my close icon wasn't present, my div there was looking some way. So my close button is going to be over here. So I'm going to import my close button from the React icons. So I'm going to use I prefer to use usually AI outline icons. So I'm going to import this from my React. It seems like I'm struggling over here with my keyboard. So I said I prefer AI close. Usually I prefer the AI button. So I just search AI close, and then AI outline close comes out of it. So I'm going to copy this and use this inside of my code where my close BTN is. And so I insert I paste AI outline close, and then let's check to see if our close button appears. Okay, as I said, I've written my CSS code already, so now we see our close button appearing. Now our buttons still do not look so nice. We would have to correct that. So to correct that, inside our this div over here, we don't just need our item.name. We need something. Our item.name is supposed to come down. Sorry, it's supposed to come down over here, and inside of our selected is sort of an absolute class name that has been added. Okay, so our item.name is supposed to be below. Now we see that it appears nicely. Sorry for the mistake over there. Now let's look at our CSS. Our selected was supposed to be below it. All right, so now you're going to need another icon for our selected button for it to appear. So we want a check mark to be on it. So I'm going to search AI check. Okay, I see AI outline check. I'm going to use that inside of my project. So I put my check but over here. All right, my check icon over here. So anytime you select, you expect to see the check button appearing on it. Remember that I've written my CSS code already, so it appears nicely. I want to rush things through so that I move on to the how our useReducer will actually help us to implement our theme that we want to see. Now everything is working perfectly as we want it to be. So now, all right, so in my project, I'm going to use the useReducer hook to update the color so that the color theme applies to everything over here. Okay, so for me to do that, I'm going to use the useReducer hook as I said before. So I want us to understand how the useReducer works. So let's go to documentation. Let's go read the documentation and check out to help us understand how the useReducer hook actually works. So in your favorite search engine, you just search useReducer hook React hook, and then you search React dev. Okay, so I kind of like the documentation on the react.dev because it's easy to understand. So right here you see the useReducer hook, and then you help us to understand the useReducer. But mind you, we're going to implement our useReducer hook in a context in a context API. So before we move on with the useReducer hook and its understanding, let's understand how to use the context API so that we implement our useReducer hook inside of our context API. Okay, so now over here in so over here still in the react.dev documentation, we see over here use context. So straight away let's click on use context and understand how to implement our context API in our project. So I click on that, use context. Okay, use context is the React hook that lets you read and subscribe to context from your component. So it's trying to say that context is like a value that you've created inside the component, but you want to make it available to other components. So to avoid prop drilling, basically that's why we use the use context hook. So over here, you're going to learn how to implement the use context. All right, so let's check out something over here. In implementing your use context, in creating a context API, you'd first have to import your use context from the React. Okay, in your known models, your use context is somewhere over there. So you import your use context, and then you use your use context. All right, so I'm going to use ChatGPT to create a sample context API code for me, and then I'm going to copy ChatGPT's code inside of my project and then edit it straight away. So I open ChatGPT over here as it's loading. Then I'm going to type out create a sample context API code I can use for my React projects. Enter. So automatically ChatGPT generates the code for me to use in my React project. So you see that it does that over here. Now automatically ChatGPT provides a sample of a context API, commenting out and explaining how I can actually use it in my projects. All right, so let's copy the code from over here into our project. First, let's check it out. Let's check it out first if everything is intact. Okay, so create a consumer hook, and all that. ChatGPT gives you how to use it in your project. It explains everything in depth for you. All right, so let's just copy the code into our project. Okay, so let's come back to our project. Now let's create a context API file. So under the folder components, you just create another file. Okay, so let's name that file contexts.jsx. All right, so we create that one, and then we straight away paste our code from ChatGPT, Ctrl+V, and then we paste our code. Everything looks clean now, but then you realize that there are so many comments showing us steps that we could use for our project, but we really do not need that. And then there are some pieces of the code that we wouldn't need in our context API file. Okay, so ChatGPT gives us a state value and all that. Let's take out this part, example of usage, because you are going to export our context value and use it. Okay, so instead of doing everything inside over here, you're going to export the values so that it is accessible in the other component. So now so as I said, we're going to take some pages of code out. We took it out, and then you're going to export what we need. So here you're going to export my context. You're going to export my provider. So you're going to wrap the whole app inside of the my provider, and then the my context over here allows you to access the children that you want to make available to the other JSX files. Okay, so now let's go on. But for the meantime, I want to modify this to make the code mine. I don't want to use everything ChatGPT gave me. I want to modify it. I want to possess the code. You get it? So let me start to delete the comment first. Let me delete the comment first over here. So let me delete this line of comment over here too, and then let me change this thing over here to app context. I want to make the code mine, so I want to do some slight modification. You can skip this part of the video. I'm just changing the word ChatGPT gave me. I'm going to make it possessive. Okay, app context, app provider. Here I'm going to make it app provider, and then wherever my context is, I'm going to change it to app context. So I'm going to delete the state value ChatGPT created for me because I don't need it in my code. And then the my context dot provider over here, let me change this one to app context. You see that we changed the spelling over here, so we have to change it everywhere in our code. So it changes to app context, and then let's delete this comment over here, so we don't need that. And then over here let's change this one to app context. Okay, we are possessing our code over here. Let me change that to app context, and then And then ChatGPT writes a lot of code over here, throwing a new error and all that. But let's do our changes first. You change this to app context, and then my provider, we change it to app provider. All right. So I think we are done polishing up our context API over here. Oh, remember we've deleted our state value, so we don't need this one for now. We're going to input our own state values over there. Or any it could be a state value, it could be a function, but then we will use our own value. So for the meantime, let me create my own value. Let's just use first over here, and then let me make the state value 0, and then first over here. So the value of first is going to be made available everywhere in my code. Okay, so I'm going to see, I'm checking whether the context API works perfectly in my code before I move on. So I do that, and then the next thing that I do is that I want to change this to I want to change it to use global context rather. I want to possess my code, so I'm so keen on possessing my code. So I change this to use global context, and then I update the value here to use global context. So after we've done that, remember that we need to wrap our whole app in the my provider. So let's wrap the whole app inside of the app provider. So I'm going to import the app provider from my context, and then straight away I'm going to wrap the whole app. So over here I'm going to wrap the whole thing, the navbar, the search, and the cart inside of the app provider. Without doing this, take note that your context, the children of your context API, won't be available in your code for you to use everywhere. So I do that. It seems like there are so many errors over here. Let me check, correct those ones out. Alright, seems like there was a closing tag over here, so I've taken the closing tag out, and then everything looks okay now. The whole app is wrapped inside of the app provider. So now let's go on to see if it actually works. So we are going to import our use global context over here inside of our card.jsx. So import the use global context, and then the state value that we created inside of the context API, that is the first. Let's import it also. So now I think I have to make some changes. I'm going to export the use global context over here as an object, and then I need to still export my app context. Okay, sorry for the error over there. I just realized it. So after doing that, I want to simplify the code over here. I see that there is a lot ChatGPT gave me over here, so I'm just going to return my use context, and then I'm just going to make the app context. I'm just going to return that to make it simplified. Yeah, ChatGPT wants to specify its own error, but then I want to make the whole thing simplified. Let's React do everything, and I'm going to change my state value over here to UU. Okay, so now I console log the first in the card.jsx. So I'm going to, let's check out in our project whether you're going to see the value of our first. So we expect to see UU in our project. All right, so let's do that. Let's go to our project, and then yes, we see over there UU in our console. So UU is, which means that our context actually worked. All right, so for me to use the useReducer hook in my project, I'm going to follow the officer documentation. Okay, so I'm going to read the documentation from one of my favorite websites. So useReducer is a hook that lets you add a reducer to your components. Okay, so let's scroll down to see how this actually works. All right, so useReducer takes in some parameters, as you can see over here. First, it takes in the reducer function. The reducer function specifies how the state gets updated. Okay, so it's like the useReducer hook takes in arguments, and then, or we call it parameters, takes in parameters, and then these parameters would include a state value. So the reducer hook allows you to actually update your state value. So say your state value is 1 and you want to change it to 4, you can use reducer hook to do that. But the wonderful thing about the use reducer hook is that use reducer hook allows you to update multiple states using just a single function. Okay, that is why it is so awesome over here. All right, so now let's go on to see more and more. That's additional arguments over here. Another thing you must know about use reducer hook is that you need a dispatch function in your use reducer hook. So just look at the first line of code over here. Const state and then dispatch is equals to use reducer, and then your reducer function, and then your state value. That's here over here. They use age to specify their state value. The dispatch function allows you to update the state to a different value and then render it and then trigger a re-render. So the dispatch function works in such a way that, see, you want to use the use reducer hook in more than one area of your work. Okay, so the type of your dispatch that you use will let you know that you are using this kind of a use reducer hook at this particular part of your code. I hope this makes sense. So it's like you have a reducer hook, you want to implement a reducer hook using on click of a button, or you want to use a reducer hook to handle the sum of some numbers. You want to use a reducer hook to do some other stuff. So over here you specify the type. So the type is more or less like a parameter. So you have to take note that the use reducer hook, when you are writing your reducer function, depending on the dispatch type that you did, you're going to specify the dispatch types under your action.type. So this actually helps you to specify which of the dispatches you are implementing. So let's say you have 5 dispatch values. So let's say in this case you have dispatch of increment of age, you have a dispatch of decrement, you have a dispatch of maybe submit, you have a dispatch of add. So under here you specify your dispatch type under your action.type, and then you then go ahead to update your state value. So as you can see here, the dispatch is increment of age, and then it corresponds to the action type that is here incremented what age. Let's go straight forward to back to the project and apply this use reducer hook in our project. Okay, so now let's implement the use of the use reducer hook in our project. So to do that, first you have to import the use reducer over here. So we add that as part of our imports. So we don't need this for now. Let me take this one out. Let me take this one also out, and then inside of our card.jsx, let me take these ones also out for now because we don't need them yet. So inside of here you have to initialize the use reducer hook. So to do that, you have to I use some React snippets which make things easier for me. As you can see here, my React snippets make the things look easier. So I'm just going to edit it and then does it, okay, to make things easier. So first, theme reducer. I'm going to make this theme reducer. This theme reducer here is the function that would work out, that will let us update the state of our reducer. And then I'm going to create an object also, an object called initial. Okay, so now let me create that object initial. So the initial, this JSON object will hold the state values that we want to use. So initial, and then for our initial here, we are working with our theme. Okay, so our initial, let's make the initial blue. Okay, so the initial state over here is blue, but then we got to handle that. So to handle that, we are going to create a reducer function over here. Okay, so let me create my reducer function over here. So const theme reducer, and then inside of it I'm going to handle the dispatch. Okay, so now I want to handle the dispatch inside of here. but then you would have to initiate your dispatch. So in this case, the dispatch that we want to initiate will fall under here. Anytime we click on this button, on any of the buttons inside of our React app, we expect that the dispatch gets initiated or gets implemented. So or you click on the yellow, the dispatch has to trigger, or you click on brown, the dispatch has to trigger. Okay. So over here, our dispatch is going to be what? So here, dispatch, and then we specify the parameters. So first we specify the type of the dispatch. The type of the dispatch over here will be what? Toggle theme. And then we also specify, so for the meantime, let's just specify the type of our dispatch over here, toggle theme. Take note that it has to be in curly brackets. Okay, that is how it is done. Okay, so now our dispatch type is toggle theme. You're going to handle the dispatch type toggle theme inside of our theme reducer function over here. So instead of writing multiple, take note, the theme reducer function takes in arguments, takes in the state value, and then it takes in your action. I'm going to go deeper to explain this one very soon, how this one works. So it actually takes in your state value and then takes in your action value. All right, so in your official documentation, you saw a lot of if and else statements, but in JavaScript, to avoid writing a lot of if and else statements, you can just use the switch statements. Okay, so you see, I use a snippet, so everything comes out fast for me over here. So instead of my switch statements, I'm going to specify that depending on the action.type, that is depending on the type of dispatch that you initiate. Okay, so in the first scenario, we realize that we initiated what? Toggle theme. So that will be the case that we are looking at. So our case value here would be toggle theme. So anytime we implement this toggle theme, we expect that what? The state gets what? Updated. Okay, so we are going to return a new value of the state. Okay, so the new value of the state that we will return here is, say you want to update the theme for it to become red and no longer blue. Remember that initially we set the initial state value to be blue, but over here the reducer hook allows us to update the theme to see red. So here I do not want to do multiple cases, so I'm going to take this one out for now. So my default will just be, for my default, I'll just return the states. So that is it. I think that is that for now. So you're going to get this to work for us to see. Okay, so for us, we have to see whether our state value over here has actually been updated. That is, our blue here has been updated. So I'm going to pass down our state value using our context API and then access our state value over here. Okay, so now let's do that. Const states equal to use global context. We call that function and then we console log our states value. All right, so now let's see if everything worked like we expected. All right, so the state value is an object as we said, but we want to access specifically the theme. So if you want to really access it, it should be what? The state.theme. The state.theme. So we do that. Let's refresh our page. And then you see over here that state.theme is what? Blue. You see, it's blue. So on click, it seems like there's an error over here, but we're going to handle that later. Okay, it seems like there's But then let's go ahead straight forward to implement our change in color that we want to see. Another parameter that the dispatch can take is called the payload. Okay, so the dispatch can also take what? The payload. The payload is a parameter that takes in a value. So it's like you're able to pass down a value from here, from your button. You're able to pass down the value inside the team reducer function. So what value do we want to pass down in this case? We want to pass down the value of what? The item. Okay, so we pass down the items. So to access the item, so how you're going to update is that over here is going to be action dot payload. So now the new theme value becomes what? Action dot payload. So if we click on, so over here we see that is blue. Now when we click on it, you expect that it becomes red. Nah, we are not seeing red. It seems like there's an error over here. So we look at our console and realize that indeed there's an error over here. This is supposed to be just dispatch, not dispatch events. Okay, so we have to correct that error in our code, else this won't work. Okay, so we come back to our code and correct the error. Dispatch, it's just going to be dispatch. So now we refresh our page. Let's view the console to see if this really works. Okay, we still see that dispatch isn't defined. This is because we haven't passed down the value of the dispatch down onto our children. So in addition to this, we have to pass down the dispatch. So we pass down the dispatch gets accessible to the card.js. That is the whole point of the context API, for you to be able to create components that are available everywhere in your React app. So which means that we need to import our dispatch from over here too, and then this time around everything should work perfectly. You see, as I click on any of this, the value of the state that is blue, the value of the state that is team, changes from red to the what? Updated value. Changes from blue rather to the updated value. So initially it was blue. So when you refresh the page, realize that the value of the state that is blue changes from blue to what? Red. You see, on click of any of the buttons. You see, but now the key feature I want to implement is that, say this is red, we want it in such a way that when we click on any of the buttons, the color of the buttons is updated to become what? The theme. Okay, so for us to do that, we need another parameter for our dispatch. So we come back over here, look at our dispatch. We use this parameter we call what? Payload. So this payload allows you to pass down any value from inside of your function. So over here, you want to pass down the value of the item.color. Okay, so we pass down that value, which I assign to item, and then we update the value of the theme to the new value or the new color. Okay, so over here, for us to access the payload item, what you're going to do is you're going to key in action dot so you're going to key in action dot what? Payload. So upon key in action dot payload, we expect that the value of the theme gets updated to the payload parameter. Okay, so we click on brown. You see over here that the theme changes from blue, that is the default. So we come back here, you see that the initial state over here is blue, but then on click of any of these buttons, it changes to that which is specified. So it changes from default to yellow to brown to purple. We refresh our page and we see that everything works out what? Perfectly. Okay, so now that we've seen that everything works out perfectly, now we need this value or this color over here. We need it for us to apply that theme to our whole React app. Okay, I hope this thing makes sense. All right, let's move on. So now we know that we can access our state.theme and everything. So now it's left for us to actually implement the change in color that we want to see. Okay, so our state.theme changes depending on the payload item or on our payload value. Okay, so before we continue, I want to remind you that I've written my CSS code already. Okay, so I have different color themes over here. So my default is these colors. My default is the blue colors, the blue color palette. But then I have a purple color palette, I have a brown color palette over here, and I have a yellow color palette over here. Okay, so now we are going to change our states for it to change from the default blue to that of the purple variables, or that of the brown variables, or that of the yellow theme variables. Okay, so for us to do that, which means that we want to change what the color palette of the whole React. For us to do that, we have to target what our app.jsx. But remember that in React, if your app provider is over here, you will be unable to access your global context. Okay, you'll be unable to access your global context, which means that you have to remove the app provider up the ladder. The app. So let me do what I'm talking about. So say you do const state.theme over here and try to access this with our use global context. So let's do this. Let's just make this theme and then let's console log our state.theme. So let's do this and try to, I think I've done some console logs over here somewhere. I have to remove that for the meantime. So let me remove that, and then, so you see something. It starts producing errors straight away. Okay, you cannot destructure the property of states. So to fix this error, what you're going to do is that you're going to move this app provider up the ladder. So you're not going to wrap the whole app over here. You're rather going to wrap it inside the main.jsx. Okay, so let's import our app provider from over here. And then you're going to wrap the whole app inside of our app provider from over here. Okay, so let's wrap it over here, app provider. And then straight away we wrap the whole app over here. So over here, remove the app provider because the wrapping has already been done in the main.jsx. And now let's check it out if the errors still do appear. So over here, you see that the errors do not appear again because we can now access our value from inside our context. Okay, all right. So for us to update the color theme of our React app, what we are going to do is that we have to change the whole class. Let me close this everything over here so that it looks clean for us to understand. So over here, you're able to access our state.theme based on the color. So for our whole React app, what you're going to do is that you're going to toggle the class name. Okay, you're going to toggle the class name based on that of the state.theme value. Okay, so I would want to specify that if state.theme is true, then I want to write a ternary statement. This is vanilla JavaScript. But then to make everything easier and simpler, I'm going to make the initial theme to be just nothing. Okay, so that I don't write a ternary statement over here. I don't want to make this a whole lot. Okay, so let me do this. So if the value of the state.theme is provided, state.theme, we expect that the state.theme colors get applied to the whole page. So state.theme theme variables is going to be what we want. So you are going to see some magic right over here. So anytime the state.theme value is changed, okay, we expect that what the whole theme of our React app changes to the class names of that of our state.theme. So if you say this is blue, the classes of the CSS properties of that theme, say purple, get applied to the whole page, okay, depending on the state.theme. So we click on yellow and see what happens. The whole page changes from the default blue to yellow. We click on brown, it changes from the default blue to brown. We click on purple, it changes from the default blue to purple. We go back to this and then it works. You see, everything works out nicely like we want it to be. Okay, I hope this makes sense. All right, so another thing you have to implement is for us to close to for this close button to work. So let's finish that straight away. All right, so I want, because we have two buttons over here, we have this close button and we have another change color button over here. I would want to implement the close feature still in my context. I want to make use of it. Okay, I don't just want this just to be there. So I'm going to create a new state value. So let me call this is modal open. So let me set the initial value to false. So it's modal open. Let me change this to false, and then let me create a function called toggle modal. So I do that, I create a function, and then anytime I toggle the modal, I want to change the is modal open to that of its opposite value. Okay, so if initially it is false, it becomes what? True. So I'm going to pass it down over here too. Let me just pass down the toggle modal. Okay, so let me also pass down the is modal open too. I'm going to need it somewhere, I believe. All right, so this is how my code is going to look like. I want my code to be clean. So let me do something over here. All right, so let's keep with this for now. So you're going to implement the close button in our card.jsx. So we are going to need it in our card.jsx. So in our card.jsx, we need the toggle modal button too. Okay, so we need that, and then you're going to toggle the modal inside of our close button. So on click, we expect that the modal will be toggled from true to false. Okay, so nothing is being implemented yet because we need to wrap our whole card is depending on whether the modal is true or not. Okay, so our whole card needs to be wrapped. So for us to wrap our whole, not the whole card, but the whole modal on top, you need to wrap the whole modal on top over here, depending on whether modal is opened or not. So let me bring that one to here. It's modal open. Oh, come on. Let me just copy the value from here. So depending on whether the modal is opened or not, it's modal opened. So if its modal opened is true, then this modal has to appear. So if its modal open is true, this modal has to appear, and if it isn't true, it just vanishes. So remember that our initial state is false. So for us to open our modal, the modal has to be opened via the nav bar. That is on click of this button. So anytime you click on this button, we expect that what the modal opens up, and then when we click on the close button, the modal what closes. So we need our use global context tool over here for us to access that. So we just access cost, then if you get it from the use global context. So you just get the value of the toggle. You just need to toggle the modal. So toggle modal over here. So on click of the nav bar, the modal has to be toggled. All right, so on click of that change color button, we expect that what the modal has to be toggled. So over here, my on click feature comes in, and then I toggle the modal straight away. So this works perfectly. As you can see, anytime we click on this button, the modal opens up and then the color gets changed. An added feature I want to add to my project is that anytime we refresh the whole page, we expect that the theme that we selected remains. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to use a local storage to do that. I'm going to store the value of the state.theme inside my local storage so that anytime my page reloads, straight away the color that I selected remains, because I don't want it that my page reloads and then a new color gets applied every time. Nah, I don't want it to be like that. Okay, so for me to do that, so to implement local storage into my app, so to implement a local storage into my app, what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the local storage into my app. So let me initialize it from over here. So let me create const current theme call current theme color. I'm initializing the local storage over here, guys. So it's going to be local storage dot get item, and then let me save this in my storage as just theme call. That's theme color. Let me just save it like that. It seems like there's an error somewhere. Oh, so it's going to be local storage dot get item, and then I'm going to save it as the theme color. Let me just make it theme col. So I'm going to save it as what? The theme color. Okay, so now I have to create a use effect hook. So this use effect hook is going to be such that anytime the value of the state.theme is changed, the value gets saved into our local storage. So it's going to be something like this. I need my use effect hook. So using my use effect hook, so let me put the use effect hook over here. So in my use effect hook, I want it to be such a way that when my state.theme value change, the use effect hook is supposed to store the value of the state.theme. So the use effect hook helps you. So you're going to put that in as a parameter. Okay, so let me put that as a parameter for our state dot what theme. Okay, but take note that this state dot theme only gets initialized after this line of code. So effectively this line of code should be after here. Okay, so it stores the value of the state dot theme. So now local storage, we want to save that to local storage, so it's going to be local storage dot set item. Then we want to set the item. So the key that we used was what, theme core. And then we want to set the item to the state dot theme. So the value of the state dot theme gets stored in what, our local storage. So anytime the page reloads, we expect that the theme becomes our current color or an empty value. Okay, so if no value was inside our state.theme, anytime the page reloads, if there was no value, we don't expect any item to be there. So let's say it is yellow and then the page reloads, there's a value stored in our local storage. So let's check that in our console over here. Memory. All right, so let's check that in our console. Okay, so the page reload, see the color is default. Okay, so say the color is default, we check over here, the theme color is blue. So anytime we refresh our page, the theme is still blue because the value has been stored in our local storage. Okay, but what we also want to implement is that you see that over here the selected value is default, meaning that we have to store this selected value also in our local storage. Okay, so we have to do two local storages over here. So the second storage you're going to do is that this time around you're not going to do it inside of our context, but rather we'll do it inside of our card.gsx, because our card.gsx has this selected theme. Okay, so over here you see this selected theme. Anytime the page is refreshed, this selected theme has what, remain. So we need a use effect hook over here too. So over here to use our use effect hook, and then we need to create our use effects thereafter. So we create our use effect hook, and then our current color here is blue. So inside of our use effect hook, we are going to inside of our use effect hook, we are going to initialize our local storage. So const current theme color. So our current theme color should be equal to local storage dot get item, and then say we want to store our value as our theme color this time around. So we want to store our value as our theme color, and then if our, so over here you see that we have our current theme, which is what, blue. So the current selected theme, anytime the page is afresh, the current selected theme is expected to be blue. So we are going to assume that if, let me delete this thing from here, let me take this thing away and take this thing away for now. We're going to come back to it. All right. So if your current theme color is true, then we want to set our current theme color. If our current theme color is true, then we want to set our current theme color to that of what is stored in a local storage. So now it will no longer be blue, but it will be the new and what updated value. Okay, so let's say we select default and we refresh our page. When we yes. All right, so remember there's one thing left to do. We've just merely initialized our local storage. So let me put this above the button, the function that handles the button. So now we want to let the local storage do its job. So the local storage dot set item. So we are going to set the theme color to that of what the new value of the item. So the value of the item gets stored in a local storage, and then anytime the item is true, so we reload our page, we see that the selected value is what? Purple, because purple. So inside of our local storage, we have two ideally we should have two values, two key values. We should have the value of our theme color, and then we have the value of our theme code. So the theme code handles that of the whole React app, and our theme color handles that of our select buttons. So this is how this will be the end of this project. You realize that I made my small project over here responsive. Okay, it's always, as a developer, it's always good to make your design responsive. Okay, your website is responsive. So over here, you see that's very responsive. So two values are being stored. So ideally, this is how you implement different color themes in your React project using the useReducer hook. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, okay? And then make sure you share this video to your friends on your WhatsApp page or your social media handles. Help this video to get more views. Thank you, and see you in my next video.